What's happening, guys? If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe so you can catch the spills every week. And don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. So for a good minute, I had you guys ask me about doing videos for the new Thanos series, and I've started to do it a few times, but I kept pushing it back because of so many other things coming out. But finally we're getting to it, and it couldn't be a better time because we're only a few months away from Infinity War, and since the first time I started working on this video, a lot of crazy stuff has gone down in the comic. But another reason I wanted to hold off for a little bit was because I wanted to do this video a little closer to the movie. But not just that, I also wanted to see how Thanos got the Hulk on a leash, because Maestro is anything but a pushover. And so now, for a majority of this segment, I'm going to be talking about the Thanos series picking up from Marvel Legacy and going forward. But in order for that part to make sense, I'm going to go back and explain some of the things that have happened thus far. So where this series picks up is not too long after Guardians of the Galaxy issue 148. And at that time, in that issue, Thanos was in Nova Corp custody. And he was being escorted by some officers to the Kiln, which is also the same prison that we saw in the first Guardians of the Galaxy film. But in this particular occasion, Thanos didn't quite make it there. And the reason why is because in the process of being transported, he was able to bribe one of the Nova officers who was already corrupt. But what he ended up doing was making a deal with this officer so he would set him free. And it's really shortly after then when this new Thanos series picks up, because after he's free, he immediately wants to go back to the Black Quadrant. But between the time of the different events that happen in Guardians of the Galaxy issues and the time that he returns here, a number of things have changed since then. Most notably, Corvus Glaive being the new ruler of the Black Quadrant. And this is an opportunity that he sees sometime after Thanos had left. But the way it reads is like, even though when he was serving Thanos and he was only the leader of the Black Order, in the back of his mind he felt like the throne was his rightful place. And during that time when Thanos was gone and Corvus Glaive was in charge, he ruled much differently than Thanos. Because when Thanos would rule more like an iron fist, Corvus Glaive, he was more the type to inspire men. But when Thanos came back, he was pretty much disgusted and he thought him to be weak. But not just that, but he looked at Corvus as a sort of a thief for taking something that wasn't his own. And so Thanos beat the brakes off him, broke his staff, which is the only way to kill him, and gave Corvus the option to finish this himself or for Thanos to do it, and it would be long and painful. And Corvus took door number one. And so shortly after this, Thanos took back his throne, but for a little while now he's known something is different. And at this point early on in the series, we find out that he's dying. And what's crazy about the way that Jeff Lemire handles this, or more so referring to Jordan D. White's comment on the series, who's editor at Marvel Comics, but he refers to this Thanos series, instead of putting Thanos in the spotlight, it's more like we're following Thanos into the shadows. Because his reaction to a number of these circumstances really show us more about this character. Like, we already knew he was evil, but when we see how he responds to mortality and him first seeking help on the planet No, which has a lot of exotic vegetation and is well known for its medicine and its healing, and it's really the best place to go if you're looking to find any type of cure. But when he goes here and he finds out there's nothing they can do, he just loses it and murders everybody in sight. And it's like, we know the resume of Thanos. He dissected his mother at the age of 12, slaughtered countless people on his home planet. Like, he really don't care. But it's crazy seeing the way that this particular solo series plays out, because Jeff Lemire's approach is very personal. And when you get personal with Thanos and you look closer and you just see how much darker he really is, it's really just crazy to take it all in. But after this happens, he heads over to Gilgrath to see his father. And as you would expect, his father isn't exactly thrilled to see him. And he's not necessarily here to visit his dad because it's his dad's birthday or anything like that, but he's dying. He needs something from him. But his dad checks it out and he comes to the conclusion that it's some type of god cancer and it's eating his cells at a molecular level. But he tells Thanos that there's no way that he could fix this in time, because it would take months or years, and at best Thanos only has a couple weeks. So Thanos just punches a hole in him, partially because of the verdict, but also because the Titan didn't like the way he was being spoken to from the time he got there. But it's kind of like you already knew, because the things he did when it came to his mother, it's like his father is not exempt from any of that. But the troubles that Thanos runs into don't stop here, because in the very next issue, he gets flanked by members of the Shi'ar Empire. And even in his weakened state, he gives up a good fight, and it still takes a lot to take him down, which really just goes to show that if he had been at 100%, this whole fight would have went a whole different way. But eventually they do subdue him, take him into custody, and put him in one of their strongest prisons. And he really just lays there and waits for what he knows eventually is going to happen, because when people feel like they take down the Titan, they gotta come in and brag about it. And Dak, the warden, he's the poor sucker that walks right into this, because when he gets cocky enough to let the shields down and put his foot on Thanos, the Titan stops playing possum and starts playing Jenga with his limbs. And he's terrible at Jenga because the first one he pulls, he falls. But from here, I want to jump over to his son Thane, and he's visited by Mistress Death in his prison, where she tempts him with the idea of giving him power to be able to give him what he wants. And his only answer to what he wants is to kill Thanos. But while he's here in prison, he doesn't have his powers, and Mistress Death tells him that powers can go and powers can come again, and she'll lead him to even greater power than he had before. And it's from here where Thane started his journey to find the Phoenix Egg, and where he soon after obtained the Phoenix Force. And with him obtaining this new power, his bloodlust was insane, and at that point, Eros, Nebula, Star Fox, they knew they needed to find someone who could stop him. And so at this point, Thanos is on his home planet Titan. He's still getting weaker and weaker, and he's really doing everything he can to survive. He's surviving off of mugrats, not rugrats. But he's in such a bad state that some wouldn't even recognize him. Like, come on, you're supposed to be Thanos? Thanos doesn't get weak. And because of that, when he runs into Tiv and Biv, they're like, nah, you ain't Thanos. There's no way you could be the Mad Titan. If anything, you just mad. And they accuse him for being out in these streets perpetrating. And because of that, they ended up beating him down and robbing him. And it's really messed up because this is probably the weakest people that ever beat up Thanos in his life. And I would even go as far to say here that his pride is hurt more than anything. But they beat him down and they take anything they feel like is worth of value, including his helmet. But it's here on Titan that Star Fox, Nebula, and Champion find this beaten down Thanos because they need to get him restored so he can defeat Thane. And you know somebody got some mad power where you can't take him out yourself and you gotta go get their daddy. Because regardless of what condition they daddy in, he gonna get him right. He gonna put that smack down on the boy. But first, before they even go there, Star Fox, who's Thanos' brother, takes him to the God Quarry. And it's here where people of great power are tested, but this test comes at a price because if you don't pass, you'll be trapped in stone and stuck here forever. And this place was designed to test the integrity of gods. And integrity is one of those words that's usually only used in context to something being good, but that's not necessarily true. By definition, integrity is a state of being whole and undivided, also unimpaired and of sound construction. And that's what the God Quarry tests, because if you at your core sustain true integrity, then you'll be released from the God Quarry, not only restored, but all of your attributes which are uncompromised will be amplified as well. And everybody who goes here sees something different. Like for Thanos, he saw himself as an Avenger, and it looked so real to him at first, but eventually he figured out that it wasn't, and he knew that he would never do anything like that. And that's how he passed his trial and came out stronger than ever. And it was from here that he got the power that he needed to defeat Thane, even though Thane had the Phoenix Force, which really arguably wasn't an appropriate example between Thanos versus the Phoenix Force, because Thane really just used it as a wrecking ball. He wasn't aware of his full power and potential. And because of this, Thanos sends him to the pit of the God Quarry. But Thane doesn't come back out, mainly because he lacks the integrity that his father has. But not just that, he really has no idea who he is. And it's impossible to have full integrity if you don't first know who you are. Now, will he figure this out on his own while he's in there? I hope so, because I would love to see him return in the future and come for Thanos. But also at this point when he was placed into the quarry, he also no longer has the Phoenix Force, so he's on his own. And so now Thanos, now that he's fully restored, he just goes on back to being Thanos, destroying what he wants and taking what he wants. And from here we pick up with Thanos taking T'Chari Prime, which is the home world of the T'Chari. But shortly after doing this, someone else comes in wringing chaos and tearing up things left and right. And it's Ghost Rider. And I'll tell you guys which Ghost Rider this is in a little bit. Chances are it's not the one you think. But when he comes here, he tells Thanos that he's sent here not of his own motive, but because the person he works for wanted the Rider to bring him in. And initially Thanos thought it was Mephisto, and rightfully so, because this guy is a Rider, and who else would they be working for, if anyone? But Thanos gets up and starts walking down, and he's like, okay, he's gonna want to fight. But that's expected because this is Thanos, and he's not just gonna up and go with anybody who just walks to his doorstep. But what the Rider does is pretty crazy, because he actually stops time because he has a piece of the Time Stone, and he wraps Thanos with the chains of Cyttorak. And I just gotta say, if we were to actually see that like in a film, that scene right there would be epic. With Thanos knocking out Ghost Rider, him stopping time, Ghost Rider stopping time and coming back and wrapping him with the chains of Cyttorak, like come on. But after he does this, he chains him to the bike and takes him millions of years into the future. Millions of years. And this far into the future, the universe is desolate. Life is few and far in between. But the Rider brings Thanos in where they approach the throne of the one who's conquered it all. And first of all, when they approach the throne, it's the head of Galactus. Like the seat of the throne itself sits inside of the mouth of the head of Galactus. That right there is just a statement by itself. But as Thanos approaches this throne in the shadowy figure, like he's still talking junk even when he's in chains. But the shadowy figure just reaches out, waves his hand, releasing Thanos from the chains of Cyttorak, and he tells him, I'm not here to oppose you. Because at the end of the day, truth be told, Thanos is already ruler of everything. And that's when he sees the person that sent for him and brought him here was himself millions of years in the future. And man, this guy's been through it. And what's crazy from here, we start to really get that explanation of how everything came to this. And at this point, we're very familiar with the past of Thanos. Thanos. And we know about the Infinity Event, Infinity Wars, Annihilation, times where he's faced Galactus before and even Odin, and he's either won or survived these encounters. But either way, no matter the encounter, with Thanos being cursed with immortality, over time he will gradually find ways to get stronger, but because of time, the different heroes and other gods even would eventually get weaker. And the way he breaks it down is really just like a game of patience. And in the case of Thanos, time is really on his side, because eventually, if given enough time, Thanos would accumulate the power to eventually beat anyone. And that includes Maestro, Odin, Galactus, Black Bolt, even the Celestials. And on top of that, the tower that he built where he places his throne inside of, which is the head of Galactus, the tower that he's built is made from the bones of Celestials, which is ridiculous. And this is him increasing power over the course of millions of years. And when the younger Thanos hears all this, he's like, yeah, okay. Then bam, he's like, you imposter. Like, whatever it is you selling, I'm not buying. And he doesn't believe any of this. And from his point of view, he really thinks it's all a trick. And he feels like these two weird dudes done dragged me out here and told me this crazy story. And Ghost Rider tries to step in between the two, and Thanos, younger Thanos, is like, I'm just gonna crush your skull and figure out this whole death thing that you think you got figured out. And that's really just a reference of what Ghost Rider said earlier when he first traveled back in time and said, don't try to kill me because that's not gonna end well. But then really the older Thanos is just like, let's skip all the mess, I need your help with something. And he knows he's powerful enough to take him, but it's like he just wants to skip to the important part of what he needs to say. But as you already know, younger Thanos has to find this out the hard way, because at the end of the day, he's still Thanos, and there's very little you can do to persuade this guy out of a fight. But after fighting his younger self and beating him to a certain extent, he gives him a piece of information that only Thanos would know. And that piece of information is the birth name that his mother gave him when he was first born. And even though he did go on to kill her when he was 12, this piece of information that she shared with him in his childhood, neither her or Thanos shared that information with anyone else. So that eliminated all doubt right there. But from there, I want to jump to Ghost Rider and talk about his penance stare, because Thanos undergoes this in just a little bit. And this is crazy because anyone who is subject to the penance stare, they suffer that moment of pain and torture that all of their victims have gone through. And there is nobody in the Marvel Universe who has inflicted as much torture and death as Thanos. No one. Name somebody. Woo, not no one. And it's crazy because when he does this, he enjoys it. And as a matter of fact, it's one of the reasons the older Thanos keeps this Ghost Rider around. And on top of that, this future Thanos actually does this like every morning, like a morning routine. Like instead of just having a cup of coffee, this is the kick that gets his day started. Every day. But from here, the older Thanos lets the younger one know that he has to prepare himself to face this enemy that's coming. And it's the enemy he refers to as the Fallen One. And so he leaves to get armored up and ready to fight after having a meal. And this leaves the younger Thanos sometime with Ghost Rider, where they get to talk and he gets to answer some of the questions that Thanos has. And that's mainly because the conversation with his older self didn't quite go like that. Like the older Thanos, he'll say what he needs to say, then he gets up and just walks off. And their conversation is kind of like a walk with me, talk with me kind of thing, because he walks with Ghost Rider to quote unquote feed the dog. And they walk down this huge stairwell, and beneath the tower, we find Maestro. And it's crazy because going through all the different Hulk stories and seeing Hulk in this state, or Maestro in this state, same difference, I know. But seeing him here, it begs the question of what seemed to be a being of unlimited strength reaching his limit. And because of that, he becomes subject to Thanos. And once again, we traveled millions of years into the future. So that doesn't mean there's not a different case or instance where this could have gone differently. And we'll probably dive deeper into that in another video, because this is one of many bits of information we're given in this series that's kind of left us thinking like, wow, how did it get to this? And some of it we'll find out will be revealed in future issues in the Thanos series, but for the other things that aren't, we'll probably just do a separate video and discuss some of those ourselves. But with Ghost Rider explaining some of these things and kind of breaking it down for the younger Thanos, he gives him a number of examples of how things change. And it's crazy because Ghost Rider realizes that he didn't tell Thanos who he actually is, and he is Frank Castle. And when you think about it, it is pretty badass. But what's crazy here is when he tells this to Thanos, Thanos has this shocked look on his face, and then he's like, I don't know you. Like that name does not ring a bell, I don't know. Never heard of the guy. And it makes sense because Punisher's more of your street level vigilante, and Thanos could care less about anything like that. But when he goes back to speak to his older self tells him that he's trying to get somebody back, and that person of course was Death. And even though earlier in the series where Thanos defeated Thane, at that time he didn't care to be with Death, he just pushed her to the side. But I like here that the older Thanos has a lot more wisdom, and he tells the younger Thanos that you just don't get over her like that, and that deep down inside, if he's honest with himself, it's always been about her, and that's not gonna change. But as they're here talking, the older Thanos, he's suited up to face the Fallen One while they're having this conversation in the meanwhile, but before they know it, the Fallen One arrives. And when this happens, like the younger Thanos, he's like kind of thinking for a minute like, well, if you're all this powerful, what one person are you afraid of? And that's when the older Thanos tells him that it's not just one person. The Fallen One is a title. And when he looks up, he sees the Silver Surfer coming through heavy with a whole lot of backup, just ready to wreck everything in front of them. But I'm gonna end it right here for this one, guys. And this series is pretty crazy because in the issues coming forward, I believe we'll see that battle where Thanos fought Galactus and defeated him. And we'll also get a Ghost Rider Punisher origin story as well too. And I would really like to see how all that plays out exactly, especially if we get more detail in the battle between Maestro and Thanos and how far in the future that actually happened. Like, I want to know everything. But like I said, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed the video or learned something new, go ahead, smash that like button, and I'll be sure to have links in the description so you can check out plenty more. But that'll do it for now, and I'll catch you on the next one. All right, later.